I actually like the Battlefield 2042 beta a lot. Yeah. First game, first spawn, 25 kill streak. I felt at home in a way. As time went on, the cracks started to show, but for the most part, I enjoyed it. 2042 feels more like a sequel to Battlefield 4 than my personal favourite Battlefield 1. Specialists and the class system have been the main topic of recent discussions. While important, I'd like to discuss other things like the level design. I do think the additional specialists we haven't seen yet will change up the game even further. However, I do prefer a more traditional class system. Having a clearer idea of whom I'm facing against and what they can do would appeal to me more. Perhaps the solution is to restrict the gadgets and make them behave more like traditional classes. Having clear distinctions between each faction is really important and something they do need to address. Quickly knowing who is friend or foe in a fast-paced FPS like this and feeling like you're part of a bigger force is essential to the Battlefield experience. Do that well, and the immersion that many of us believe is lacking will surely be improved upon. Despite many of the same specialists in this game, I did find the game to be immersive for the most part. Good audio is needed to achieve this, something the console version seemed to get better than PC. BF1's audio was the gold standard that DICE really needs 2042 to match. Movement-wise, it felt pretty solid. Definitely not a fan of the ADAD spam. Sliding wasn't ridiculous like it was in BF1 originally, and the crouching seemed a little delayed and sluggish. Perhaps a design decision. The speed keeps the engagements flowing, while the slower actions prevent you from instantly disappearing behind cover. Honestly, I'm kind of fine with all of it. The faster pacing definitely made the game more enjoyable in many ways. I didn't feel restricted like I did in some engagements in BF1. Honestly, I would be happy with the gunplay as it was. SMGs felt like close range, assault for mid and longer, LMGs and snipers for the rest. Certainly not perfect, but I'd take this over the SMG medics dominating in BF5. Sniping honestly felt off, and I was kind of disappointed. With low bullet velocity and drag, it was very hard to do well. Maybe it was just the weapon available, maybe I just needed more time with the game. I wouldn't personally want the sweet spot mechanic of BF1 to return. Having to hit a headshot for a guaranteed one shot will prevent the sniper spam, and that can only be a good thing. Honestly, the sniping in some ways felt like BF4, dare I say, but it didn't quite have that snappy feel that I really enjoyed in BF1 and BF5. I actually wasn't fully sure how the weapons work. The aim assist with a controller was clearly not finished, and it really affected how it all felt. It appears there was spread again, but honestly, I'm not entirely sure how it all works, and where it all kicks in and why. Despite that, I had a lot of fun. The gunplay, it felt good, it felt fun. Sure, I would say that there does need to be more recoil. There didn't seem to be a lot of it. You could of course use any of the weapons outside of their intended ranges, but I did like the idea that certain weapon types tended to sit in and fit certain engagement distances. SMGs felt like pretty much close range. Obviously you're going to see some clips where I'm kind of hitting targets at longer ranges, but for the most part they weren't really designed for that, and I like that. I can't say I suffered too much with the lack of ammo. The additional ammo types there seem to be enough. The plus system I'm totally happy with. Being able to change up equipment on the fly offers up so many different ways to engage. Some may argue it allows players to go all in and be one-man army. Perhaps yeah, but you are vulnerable while using it. Before, you'd be restricted to the ranges your scopes work best at, but now you have more options, and so do your opponents. I think you could argue this opens up the game to more variety in how players will fight with each other. DICE are giving you more freedom to engage and keep the pacing fresh and fast, but in using this system, you do risk being vulnerable and being forced to use the weaker attachment, ammo type, scope, etc. in the wrong place and at the wrong time. Remember, there are many more items you'll be able to unlock and choose from, so upon release you'll likely be seeing more metas opening up and hopefully less certain optics being used like we saw in Battlefield 4. What about the teamwork though? That's been a heavy topic. Teamwork when it comes to conquest, particularly on a big map like this, has always been a little hit or miss. As the days went by in the beta, more and more players got used to the game, more pushing, capping flags, revives, ammo, heals, etc. So I do believe people need to take those things into account when discussing teamwork. Apart from the first couple of days, honestly, it kind of felt like the same as previous games for me. Breakthrough has always seen teamwork be quite different, perhaps feeling like there's more of it than in Conquest at times. Honestly, I'm positive we'll see more teamwork overall as the more players get used to the game. In the whole beta, I only saw one spawn trap on the opposing team's beginning flag. That surely was a good sign of team balance and people actually playing the game. Trying to res a friend and not pick up their weapon was slightly an annoying task. You could see the icons quite clearly, but again, it still kept happening in a couple of situations. They definitely need to fix that. Also, I would prefer that you would actually switch to the player's full kit upon switching weapons. We had that in previous games, and honestly, I think it kind of suits the game more. It's nice to, you know, switch up your entire kit completely. The solo experience in my view seems pretty solid. The health regen was fairly fast, so you could take a breather, heal up, and be on your way. You're not tied to the health pack seen in BF5, and yeah, I think that does work much better in my view. If things got a little hectic, there was always a chance to drop at a different flag if needed. I didn't always feel tied to my team if they weren't pushing certain flags or areas. Honestly, it felt pretty good. Can't say I'm a big fan of showing up on the map, however. BF1 was great in this regard. You could actually flank and play as you wish, and your skill allowed. Sure, you could be spotted, but if you had good game sense and knowledge of the action around you, moving in and around the map was highly rewarding. Visually, the game looked fairly stunning. I can't say this will be my favorite looking map, but it looked fine, decent graphics, new explosion effects, bushes moving, lots of little things here and there. I can't really complain about the visuals too much, really. Honestly, I get the complaints, but you know, looking at the cinematic scene so far, I'm sure many of the other maps will be much more visually pleasing. This map itself is fairly straightforward, so it's not going to be one of those where there's loads of detail. I think there was enough, it looked fine, but again, other maps I'm sure are going to look gorgeous, particularly that one we have seen in the Hazard Zone trailer. Many of the topics discussed so far are important in keeping a game fresh, fun, and full of replay value, but what really matters in my opinion is the level design. Maps make or break a game, particularly when it comes to FPS, and what the devs are doing here has me pretty excited. Defending on top of the tower from what seemed like a never-ending horde of enemies ascending upwards was such a rush. The design elements here and further seen across the map sure give me hope for a decent Battlefield experience in the long run. While I don't think this will be one of my favorite maps, I believe it was a good showcase for what the Battlefield 2042 experience will potentially be like. The tower can perhaps be viewed as an evolution of that seen in Siege of Shanghai BF4, sadly without the evolution. Well, from what we know so far at least. I imagine there is going to be some more destruction elements later on in the game. An evolution, I say, as it contains much more variety in engagements and potential. Something that Battlefield 1 did quite well in operations, and what the series as a whole clearly needs. Something we will no doubt see more of in this breakthrough mode, where a much clearer front line will be seen. Not having breakthrough in the beta, I feel, was a big mistake. If you've never played it, basically think of two objectives connected like the D flags, take those and move up the map to another set of objectives. Lots of flanks, battles, back and forth action. It's like a tug of war, and it's a lot of fun. BF1 and BF5 both had this. I feel like BF1 kind of did it better though. The variety in engagements, the change in how each area and map would play out, the atmosphere you'd get all from this, something definitely 2042 is showing signs of. With multiple routes to the rooftop helipad, zip lines, elevator stairs, airdrop-ins, different types of engagements kept the battles feeling refreshing and unique. One moment you're fighting off players coming up, the next hiding behind one of the boxes praying not to be outnumbered, risking a player across the helipad perhaps, or if all goes too crazy, a jump off the roof may be needed. Maybe even a cheeky zipline back in. All of this is the variety Battlefield needs. Destruction definitely could be improved upon. It would seem odd that DICE would bring back Bad Company 2 maps in Portal and work on the required destruction for those, and not use that or the evolution of that in other maps. Surely there has to be similar or higher level destruction elsewhere. Personally, I could live with every map not turning into a wasteland. There are many negatives to destruction that do need to be considered, especially when it comes to flow and people actually playing the objectives. While certain areas of the map were quite open, it seemed to me there was a great deal of cover around that wasn't being used enough. The lower section of the rooftop was great for flanks, taking a breather, and avoiding those alleys. I did like that there were plenty of trees around certain areas of the map, and these were particularly great for concealing yourself while pushing up the map and against any air support. You also had the massive tunnel in the middle of the map too, which itself allowed for swift flanks in ground vehicles. Conquest has never been particularly one of my favorite modes. BF4 had some terrible maps infantry wise. BF1 was better in some ways in my view, but neither of them were really my cup of tea. For me, I'm more of a breakthrough operations kind of guy. Back with Bad Company 2 and BF3, I love Rush. I absolutely love that mode, so breakthrough operations is kind of the bigger version in many ways. But I will say, Conquest here definitely works much better infantry-wise than some of the previous game's maps. The addition of connecting flags improves the flow. The action at C1 and C2 often goes back and forth, same with D2. The tunnel provided a decent route for infantry to avoid vehicles and pesky rooftop snipers, but at the risk of being dinked inside. As action began to focus around these areas, you'd often see the outside flags turning into spawn bases for either side. Rooftop B was a great example of this. As D1 and 2 were being fought over, many soldiers would be seen flying in. Perhaps a huge annoyance for anyone trying to cap the flag or leave, or a sweet feed for those with good aim. Such verticality was definitely a common theme across the map, something I very much welcome. Not in excess, however. There wasn't any of those situations which we had in Siege of Shanghai where snipers would just sit on a rooftop, not really doing anything, not in a good spot, and they were just sniping. Kinda like that. With all the flanks on the rooftop helipads, snipers didn't really stay up here for too long. If they knew the flow of the game, they could dominate, but if they didn't, they were often easily taken out. Pretty cool that these similarly designed buildings around D opened up new angles to defend, but weren't particularly the best spots to stick around for too long. Up here it was too open and vulnerable, a head glitch spot perhaps against another on top, or escape from below, or from a sniper far away. But other than that, there wasn't much else to them. These two here are quite open inside, encouraging flow between the flags. While these have plenty of cover that breaks up the battle, slowing the pace down and perhaps helping those leaving the tunnels with a moment of peace. Slopes outside provided a new angle to attack, offering up great sniping spots should a battle occur between two flags or a flank if needed. It definitely felt like each flag was different than the rest, and not just another point to run on over, trek for another minute, and then have to come back. You actually had battles on, near, or around them. That's really why I feel this conquest scene here is an upgrade over what's been done before. Not that it's perfect, however. The hills could be a terrible place to fight, often feeling like you never saw anybody on your travels. Fighting around the rocket and dinking enemies as they come from the outside was awesome. Underneath the rocket, vehicles could flank. That was another level to the game, and absolutely loved that. But there was far too many levels around the rocket, and particularly on the B flags with the tower, that could risk slowing the flow of the game unnecessarily. Though they may be necessary for how the map plays on Breakthrough. I've got to say, the additional flag at the tower on previous gen consoles nicely broke up the flow just a little on the tower, and the smaller playable area present here actually looked like it would be a fantastic game for 128 players, albeit perhaps a mad meat grinder at times. While the bushes were plenty, their placement felt more strategic than compared to BF5. They were placed in certain areas to obviously help navigate the open terrain and not to annoy unsuspecting players. Many have criticized DICE for not bringing over movement mechanics seen in BF5, like laying on your back. Honestly, I'd rather they were gone myself. I'm rather tired of being insta-killed by an MMG bush camping enthusiast. No please, no thank you. There are of course valid reasons for them existing, but I could honestly live without them. Not everything has to come forward with each title. Honestly, does anyone want fortifications from BF5? I would love to know. It's not that I'm against them, I'm just not sure they really belong. At least not to the extent they were in BF5. The boxes, as seen inside here, help break up the fights. Containers give you breathing spaces, again allowing for more interesting engagements, flanks, different kinds of gunfights to happen and things to happen as well in general. The interactable elements return, adding another layer to the way players engage. Do take note of the little gaps left when you shut the doors. You're not going to be as safe as you may believe. All of these design elements seem very intentional from the developers, and I love it. More variety, different engagements. This game and this series could definitely benefit from all of this. Aside from a few bad spawns the developers appear to be addressing, spawns and flow felt pretty great overall. I've mentioned here again and again about variety in engagements. Something I strongly believe Battlefield needs to keep the matches and series fresh. As much as I love BF4, it didn't always do this well, and many areas and engagements could get repetitive at times. You only have to look at the multiple ways you could approach the objectives on some of the maps in BF1 or BF5 operations to just see how much better the map design here benefits the game. I can't deny, there was many moments of waiting for action to happen, being on the wrong flag, running to another and seeing the battle unfold elsewhere, but for the most part I think that's just conquest. I did, however, always feel able to get back into the fight very quickly and resume the beasting. That is something I really appreciate. The trucks and quad bikes found often on flags and the calling system sure helped with that one. Being able to get across the map in a short amount of time just by dropping in a vehicle, very much welcomed from me. The new weather effects only add to the game in my opinion. Going from a sunny day to a storm really changes up the mood and in some ways how the map plays out. The tornado for many will be a gimmick as long as it doesn't happen often, doesn't last too long, and doesn't distract players too much from the actual game being played. I'm honestly okay with all of that. Flying in the tornado for the first time is pretty cool. It didn't get old in my opinion, you barely saw it, one in I don't know how many matches. It wasn't that often. I liked it, it was great, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of stuff people do with these elements in the game. I was happy enough with the heads-up display as it was. Sure, we do need icons on those grenades. They were terrible, and there was no need for two. Not personally a fan of the spotting balls. They need to be restricted, or at least make it so only stationary targets are spotted, allowing those of us who are moving to not be punished for playing the objective. The drop down here at the top of the screen was a little annoying at times, but I could live with that. It's certainly not as awful as some of the heads-up displays seen in Warzone. Honestly, I'm not too keen on showing up on the minimap while firing. I believe it heavily restricts the variety in how the battles play out. You only have to look at BF1 and BF5 to see the different ways you can engage that add to the experience. A sneaky flank, hiding in a corner as the enemy passes, and then jumping on in. All of these situations are restricted or gone completely if you show up on the map while firing. Of course, it may be an issue with the more meat grinder sections. I do hope DICE will listen here when I'm talking about this, or if anyone else has talked about this. I don't think there has been much discussion over these things, but honestly, I'd rather not show up on the minimap. I think it adds to the game. I think it gives much richer experiences, flanks, engagement situations, and more tactical gameplay in many ways. I don't want to be sat there looking at the minimap for players. I don't want other players to be doing that all the time either. I'd hope people are moving, trying to learn game sense, trying to learn these map knowledge, awareness, these kinds of things. But overall, I'm actually pretty happy with the game so far. That's not me saying it's perfect. I feel like there is quite a big solid foundation here that they can definitely build upon. And as much as some of these issues are serious, I feel like there is enough here to start and have a pretty decent experience at launch. The game was definitely missing some of the animations that added to the immersion like we saw in BF1 when soldiers were hit. I do also hope these soldier lines change a little from the cheesy ones that often kind of felt out of place. I can't really add much to the vehicle discussion. For the most part, they didn't appear to be too spammy. I had a lot of fun in the tank myself. I didn't use much of the aircraft purely because of the control systems in place were not working properly. There was of course a few moments where the helis were dominating, but again, once you got used to the cover and the way the maps tended to flow and the audio was working as well, it wasn't, in my opinion, that much of a problem. I always felt like there was always somewhere to go or some vehicle nearby to kind of help. There was lots of vehicles, so often once one vehicle got into an engagement with another, just a moment later, another one would come flying in, or an infantry with a Strela, a lock-on missile, or whatever, would start trying to take them down. I know there's issues with too many lock-ons, so that might be looking into, but honestly I thought they were mostly fine. Of course that might change once we play the game a bit more and see how the other maps may flow. The new physics system though, that was pretty cool. Really looking forward to seeing what else we can do with that. Just to add before I end, people need to remember this was a beta. And nope, that is not me saying this is all going to be perfect or gameplay is going to change drastically. What I mean is, some of the criticism isn't allowing for the fact that the beta was quite short. Many players barely got to play the game, rarely got stuck into it. There was no breakthrough, which I would actually argue is more immersive than Conquest, and we only saw one map. I'm glad, so glad, I never judged BF1 with Sinai Desert or BF4 and its Siege of Shanghai. By the third day, many more players were switching up specialists, trying new guns, dropping more heals, ammo, reviving more, capping flags, and other things as well. The game honestly felt very different by the third day. Surprisingly, Boris's turret gun was actually pretty good when placed in the right spots. So, there's part of me that's thinking, you know, other specialists are going to be used, and there's many more we haven't seen, and there is going to be more in the future as the game goes on. Much criticism of the game honestly has been fine. I just feel some of it hasn't quite taken in all of this into account. Plus, you know, many of these new players here are probably new to the game and adjusting to it at their own pace, and they didn't really get enough time to do that. Oh, and one thing, I only saw one spawn trap in the whole beta. That should hopefully say something about the map design. I can live with that. You know, it's gonna happen from time to time. I don't want DICE and the devs to just go all in and try and make every game so balanced. It would lead to boring, dull games, and you know, sometimes one team is just gonna dominate the other, and if it happens 1 in 20 games, whatever. I think that's fine. It happens at the professional level in sports, esports, and whatever, so you know, it's gonna happen in video games as well. So 1 in 20 or whatever it was, that's fine with me. Visually, the game looks pretty stunning. It looked good enough on previous gen, and even then, those consoles, you know, they were pushing BF1 back many years ago. It looked as good as it probably could. You know, they can only squeeze so much out of these systems at this point. The controls definitely needed work, mouse aim felt weird, and there were moments where aim assist appeared to be in the game and then it was not. A solid control settings options like BF1 and 5 is very much needed. Having played the beta mostly on PC at over 120 FPS, I was a little disappointed at no 120Hz options for next-gen consoles. For crossplay, I feel this does need to be an option. I never really felt I was at too much of a disadvantage for playing with a controller for the most part. However, in all honesty, I'd rather crossplay was based on input. I'd be fine with some of the squad call-ins seen in BF5 returning to 2042. The rockets were okay, but the artillery strikes, at least in Breakthrough, could actually be quite game-breaking. One drop of those on a single flag objective, and it's usually game over for the opposing team. I wouldn't be keen on a commander returning to the series if it means a game full of UAV spam and unbalanced games resulted from only one team having a commander. Battlefield definitely, in my opinion, plays much better when players aren't constantly showing up on the minimap. Flanks and more interesting moments become possible, and the replay value of the game is increased. It's been interesting to see the various opinions from the community. One Battlefield veterans likes it, another doesn't. Some who left after 5 have now come back and appreciate what that game offered. 2042 is clearly trying to be a sandbox game once again, an obvious attempt at a sequel to Battlefield 4 in many ways, but designed for a new audience and to try and please some veterans, but it's not gonna please all. That's the nature of each Battlefield game. It's just how it is. How will all of this translate to Breakthrough is what I'm most keen on seeing. It is my favorite mode, and something I believe Battlefield needs to stay somewhat fresh. Whatever your view, a new era of Battlefield is here, and I'm personally all for it. Will it be a perfect game? I don't know. When has Battlefield ever been? I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Let me know if you disagree or agree. Let's have a conversation. I'm not saying everything that I like about this game is perfect right now. There's lots of things I would change, but honestly, I feel like there's a pretty solid experience underneath here. Anyway, guys, I'll see you on the battlefield very soon. Take it easy.